If you've never serged elastic to fabric before, it can be a little bit intimidating. And today, I'm gonna give you all the tips and tricks you need to make sure it turns out perfectly. And I'm gonna show you different ways you can do this on woven fabric and on knit fabric. I'm gonna make this super easy for you, and you are not gonna be afraid to serge elastic anymore. And you're gonna wanna watch to the end because I'm gonna go over many different techniques with serging elastics, different types of elastics. I'm even gonna show you how to serge on the elastic in a circle. You know, armholes, necklines, leg holes, think about all that. The first thing you need to know is that there are a ton of different types of elastic out there. There's plush elastic, there's knit elastic, there is really wide 3-inch elastic, there's a little baby picot elastics. There's a lot of different types of elastics out there. So even though there's a bunch of different types of elastic, the techniques I'm going to show you today are going to apply to all of them. I'm going to teach you 4 of the most common techniques when serging elastic onto fabric. We're going to reinforce a knit seam with elastic. We are going to gather up some knit fabric with elastic. We are going to gather up and sew elastic on woven fabric. And I'm also going to show you how to serge elastic and sew it on in a circle. The first technique we're going to go over is putting elastic in a seam. So you might do this when you're sewing swimwear, sportswear, or a stretchy dress. So we're going to place right sides together, and I'm going to be creating my seam right here. And when I serge this together, I'm going to be placing the elastic right at the edge, and we're going to serge the elastic and create the seam with the serger at the same time. And when I do this, I am not going to be stretching the elastic. I just want to serge it in flat. This is going to help add durability and strength to the seam and make sure that it pops back to its original shape and doesn't get stretched out. Start this out, I'm making sure that the edge of my elastic is all the way at the edge of my fabric back here. You're gonna notice I have it lined up at the edge, but you can still see some of the fabric here. And it's okay to trim off like these little miniature chunks here. That's not a big deal. So I'm gonna put it in, and when I put this in, I wanna put it right under the needles, and I wanna make sure that the needles are gonna be in the elastic. So I'm gonna pull my hand wheel so that way my needles go in the elastic. So it's important to do this because a lot of times what's gonna happen when you have these 3 layers, it's gonna take the fabric and pull the fabric, but your elastic's gonna hang back and it won't catch the elastic right away. So really make sure that your needles are in the elastic, and then go ahead and put your foot down. And go ahead and figure out the guides on your serger. So I've got my serger set up to a 4-thread overlock, and I have my needles in the A-B position. So if you have an Amber Air S600, you'll want to do that. So just make sure your needles are over there. Use a 2 needle when you do this, make it nice and strong. And we're gonna keep that elastic lined up at the edge. Now when you do this, if you can look in here and see, our elastic is lined up right next to the blade. So we don't necessarily want to cut into our elastic, but we want to secure it with this 4-thread serge, and we can trim off any of these little extra bits. And just make sure you have all your layers nice and lined up. And another tip is when you start, take the thread tail and back and give it a little pull. This is going to help move it through the machine, and then it'll go nice and smooth. So you know these knits and these elastics, they love to move around, so just keep them nice and lined up. Sometimes the elastic likes to get sucked over to the right edge, and if it does, just go ahead, lift up the front of your foot a little bit and reposition it for yourself. Then go ahead and hold it, and to make sure it doesn't slip over to the right, hold it in the front. So notice I'm holding it over here to the left. And we're not cutting any of the elastic off. And again, don't be afraid to lift up your foot a little bit and reposition. And when you get to the end, just serge off. Now, if I was serging off this piece, I always take my elastic and I hold it over to the right, so that way the blade cuts it off. And then serge off like normal. If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure you like and subscribe to Sew Anastasia. It really helps out the channel a lot. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today. And if you'd like to learn more about sewing, make sure you check out my online sewing classes or the sewing club. Links for those are down below in the description. Now let's get back to that elastic and fabric action. We're gonna go check out the seam I just created, but first I wanna show you this. I know a lot of people are afraid of cutting into the elastic and what happens if we cut into the elastic? Is it going to destroy our project? Are we going to have to start over again? Are we going to have to seam rip the whole entire thing apart? We'll take a look and I'm going to show you what happens. So I'm going to start serging like normal. We're cutting off a little bit of the fabric right next to the elastic. And then if I come over to the right too much, we end up chopping some of the elastic off. So if I'm doing that, I'm going to lift this up, my foot. I'm going to reposition that elastic. So you can see I cut into the little chunk of elastic here, and it is making it weaker. So you potentially could leave this, but if you want to reinforce it and not have to seam rip all of that elastic off, what I want you to do is take a little piece of elastic, put it right over this spot, and we're going to start again. We're just going to put another little piece of elastic over in this spot, and then we don't have to redo the entire space. Again, make sure your needles are down in the elastic before you put your foot down. Let's reposition this and then just make sure you're not chopping off your elastic. And now we have a new little piece of elastic over here, and we'll cut off this little end and cut our thread. And then we're still going to be nice and reinforced here, and we've fixed that little spot where we cut into the elastic too much. So let's take a look at our seam with the elastic in it and our oopsie seam. So you can see we have that elastic placed on the seam. It is nice and stretchy still. Nothing is popping no matter how hard I pull that, and it bounces right back to its original shape. If I open this up, you can see that we have our seam there, and it's got that elastic in it. Again, stretching it, and it pops right back, making it nice and strong and secure for all of your stretchy needs. And here's the one where I placed that extra little piece of elastic on top. Now, this isn't something I would want to do all the time. It's not something I recommend doing a whole bunch on a project. So it will make it weak. But if you're in a pinch and you accidentally chopped into it and you want to repair it, just put a little piece over that section. It's not going to be the end of the world for your project. And if we open this up, you can see that it is still strong. We still have a nice smooth seam there. And nobody's going to know that we have that extra piece of elastic in there. And even when I feel this, it's not making a big extra bump or indent in the outside. You're never going to be able to tell that you have that extra little piece of elastic in the seam. It's hiding in between two pieces of fabric. Now that you've learned how to repair that seam with the elastic, I'm going to show you how to gather up some fabric with elastic. You could use this technique for the waist of a skirt, maybe the bottom of a sleeve. There are so many different places you can add that elastic to create some gathers on a garment. Ooh, even the top of a pocket would be cute. So now what we're going to do is take this piece of elastic, and we are going to stretch it the entire length of this piece of fabric to gather it up. And we're not going to use any special foot or anything. I'm going to show you how to do this on your serger just with your hands. When I start this, I'm going to be sewing the elastic on the right hand side. I'm going to line it up like I did before. I'm going to place it in right under the needles. I'm going to take my hand wheel and pull my needles into my elastic, put down my foot, make sure everything is nice and secure. So I like to get a few stitches in it first. And now what I'm going to do is pull this elastic in the front, but if I just pull it in the front, it's not going to want to move to the back, right? So starting this can be really hard. So I'm going to use that thread tail and back at first and pull the thread tail and back and stretch my elastic in the front. And I'm also going to use my fingers in my hand here, my palm, to control the fabric. So again, feel free to lift up that foot if you need to. I'm going to be stretching out the elastic to the front. I'm going to be holding it in the back, and we're going to serge it on. Stop when you run out of controlling it with your hand and just reposition. Hold your fabric in the back with your hand since your thread tail is gone. And now we're going to stretch that elastic out in the front, and we're going to guide it in. And I am holding it in the back, making sure it's going through nice and smooth. So I stopped because I ran out of elastic. I'm going to stretch it out, reposition, hold it in the back, and go for it. When you get to the end, watch your finger by that blade and continue through. Now let's take a close-up look at our gathered fabric with the elastic. Look at how nice and even this gather is throughout the elastic being attached to it. So that elastic has gathered up the fabric while we serged on the elastic, giving us a nice even gather. Now you can do a lot of things with this in a project. After you have it gathered, you could sew it into a different type of seam. You could take this elastic, flip it down, make sure you stretch it out and sew it down again. And then you basically have a casing with the elastic sewn to the fabric. There's lots of different places you can add this technique to a project. So adding that elastic and gathering the fabric at the same time, it's actually almost easier than creating the seam. It looks beautiful and complicated, but actually it's very easy. Now moving on from knits for a minute, we are going to serge some elastic to a woven fabric. And we're also going to gather up the woven fabric when we do this. This is a great technique again for sleeves, skirts, little details, ruffles, all the ruffles you could create. So amazing. To gather up this woven fabric, we need some elastic that I can stretch across the piece. And you don't have to gather it the max amount, but I always do because I always like max gathers. So we are going to attach the elastic, gather the fabric, and finish the edge at the same time. I'm going to be serging the elastic on the right side of the project. Now maybe for what you're doing, maybe you want it on the wrong side. It really depends on what you're creating here, but I'm going to be putting it on the right side. I'm going to take my needles, just like we did before, make sure they're in the elastic. I want to hold this thread tail in the back so I can help move it through the machine. I'm going to line the elastic up with the edge and I'm going to stretch it out. So I'm going to stretch it out and then we're going to cut off all those little fuzzies. So we're going to finish the edge too at the same time. Stop whenever you need to and reposition, especially if you have a curve. You'll notice that I'm only stretching out the elastic about 4 inches at a time. This way I have a lot of control over what's going into the machine. And then when you get to the end of your project, keep it stretched out as long as you can, and then serge off. Look at how beautiful our fabric looks all gathered up. And again, this is a woven fabric, and this is a great technique for creating ruffles and gathers. So as you can see, this edge is finished and gathered all in one step. Now I'm going to show you how to serge on the elastic in a circle. Now starting this and ending this can be a little bit tricky, so follow along closely. So when we attach this elastic, we're not going to be stretching it, we're just sewing it around the edge. So pretend you need to sew a neckline or an armhole and you got to go around in that circle. How are you going to start it and how are you going to end it? Well, come find out with me. So I've taken off the bed on my machine so I can sew in a circle here. Now, not all sergers will do this. If yours does, definitely take it off or open it up. And if it doesn't, just follow along with your bed flat. Okay, so I like to start at a seam and same technique in the beginning. Going to put the elastic in and start with it and back. Oh, I want to mention, when you start this, you have to put your fabric in parallel with the foot. You do not want to start on an angle to get this in here. You're going to end up cutting into it. You're going to create a lot of problems here. So when you put this in, take it and just put it in so that way it's parallel with the foot. Nice and straight in front of you. Okay, sometimes I will lift up this foot to get the elastic in there. It really depends on how thick the fabric and the elastic are. Once you can see the elastic back there with the needles, take the hand wheel, pull the needles down, put your foot down. Okay, and now when we sew in a circle, you're gonna do like we've been doing all along, but when we get to the end, that's where the magic really is. So just keep working your way all the way around the circle, stop and adjust it. Okay, so now we're getting back to where we started. So now what I want to do is cut off this thread tail and any extra elastic chunks that I have there. And we're going to overlap this elastic. So I want to make sure that the elastic's going right over the previous piece, and I want to overlap it about a 1/2 inch. And after I've overlapped it, I'm going to hold the extra out of the way, chop it off, and continue serging on the elastic, and then serge off. And just like that, we have sewn our elastic on in a circle. So now we have our elastic attached all the way around the circle. And this technique is great if you're sewing lingerie, underwear, bras, things like that. Let's take a look at it close up. So you can see we have the elastic here overlapped at the beginning and the end. And then when that gets folded over to the inside for your project, you never see it and it looks wonderful and it's nice and strong in that little area. You're not gonna have it pulling away. So we have a really strong edge with that elastic all the way around our circle. And again, if you wanna gather a circle, you can do the same thing with the same technique. Just make sure you're stretching the elastic while you're going around the circle, and then it'll gather it up for you. Think of an awesome puff sleeve. We just went over so many different techniques on working with elastic and your serger. So hopefully you have more confidence now when you need to attach some elastic to your fabric with your serger. Now there are so many more elastic sewing techniques out there and types of elastic, but these techniques here are gonna get you started and set you up in the right direction. We went over gathering woven fabric with elastic. We went over gathering stretchy fabric with elastic. We repaired a seam with some elastic. We just did a flat seam with the elastic, and then we sewed some elastic in a circle, going over how to start and end it. Hope you guys enjoyed learning a little bit more about elastic with your serger today. If you have any questions about it, leave it down below in the comments. And let me know if there are any other videos you would like to see with the serger. I would be happy to create one. If you guys enjoyed the video today, make sure you like and subscribe to Sew Anastasia and hit the notification bell so you know when the new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today. These videos are for you guys. Don't forget, you can take sewing classes in person with me here in Chicago, or you can take them online. Links are down below for all of that. And don't forget to follow me on social so that way we can stay connected and creative together. And make sure you check out the stories because that's where I post all the behind the scenes action. Thanks so much for watching today. Bye.